November 22nd, 1983. A hospital worker is taking her usual morning walk down the black pad footpath in Narborough, England, coffee in hand, when she sees something that makes her stop cold. There, lying motionless in the tall grass, still wearing her school uniform, is 15-year-old Linda Mann. A scarf is twisted around her neck 3 times, pulled so tight it looks less like fabric and more like a weapon. The woman drops her coffee cup. It shatters on the cobblestones. Linda had left her home the previous evening to visit a friend. It was a normal Tuesday night in a quiet village where people left their doors unlocked. She never made it home, and now she never would. When Detective David Baker arrives at the scene, he knows immediately this isn't going to be simple. The positioning of the body is too deliberate. The level of violence is too excessive. This is someone who enjoyed what they did. And in Baker's experience, people like that don't stop after just once. The autopsy reveals something strange and somewhat paradoxical. Despite the horrific nature of the attack, Linda didn't appear to suffer for very long. The pathologist estimates she was gone within minutes. But then there's the other evidence. Semen found on her body tells a different, more disturbing story about her final moments and what she endured. Here's where it gets interesting from a forensic perspective. The forensic analysis identifies the attacker's blood type, a secretor with a PGM1+ enzyme profile. In case you're not familiar with forensic serology from the 1980s, let me break that down for you in simpler terms. About 80% of people are what scientists call secretors, meaning their blood type can be determined from their bodily fluids like saliva or semen, not just their blood. This particular combination, blood type A with the PGM1 plus enzyme marker, matches about 10% of England's entire male population. Think about that for a second. In a village the size of Narborough and the surrounding communities in the area, that's potentially thousands of men who could match this profile. The police essentially have evidence that tells them their suspect could be one of thousands of people living in the area. It's better than nothing, certainly better than having no evidence at all, but not by much. It's not enough to catch anyone. Days turn into long weeks. Weeks turn into months. Linda's family waits for answers that never come. The investigation goes completely cold. The village tries to move on, but there's a tension in the air that wasn't there before. Parents walk their daughters to school. Women don't go out alone after dark. Everyone knows, deep down, that whoever did this is still out there. 3 years pass. 3 long years where Detective Baker thinks about Linda Mann almost every single day. 3 years where he wonders if they'll ever catch the person responsible. 3 years where he hopes, desperately, that it was an isolated incident. And then July 31st, 1986 happens. Dawn Ashworth is 15 years old, same as Linda was. She's walking home from a friend's house, taking a shortcut through 10 Pound Lane, a narrow path overgrown with brush, the kind of place that's perfectly fine in daylight, but feels threatening as the sun goes down. When Dawn doesn't come home that evening, her parents call the police at 9:30 p.m. The moment Detective Baker hears the details, 15-year-old girl didn't make it home, was walking alone. His stomach drops. He knows. He just knows. They find Dawn's body 2 days later, hidden under heavy brush off 10 Pound Lane. Unlike Linda, Dawn fought back hard. Her injuries tell the story of a girl who refused to go quietly. She scratched and kicked and struggled with everything she had. But it wasn't enough. The forensic analysis comes back, and it confirms what Baker already suspected. Same blood type, same enzyme profile, same attacker. Narborough has a serial predator, and he's hunting teenage girls. But now there's pressure like Baker has never experienced. The national media descends on the village. Parents are terrified. The public is demanding answers. And the police have nothing. 3 years of nothing. Then, less than a week after Dawn's body is discovered, police get a break. Richard Buckland, a 17-year-old who works at the Carlton Hayes Psychiatric Hospital, becomes a person of interest. The hospital sits almost exactly between both attack sites. Witnesses place him near 10 Pound Lane around the time Dawn disappeared. And when police bring him in for questioning, something strange happens. Buckland knows things. Details about Dawn's attack that were never released to the public. Specific information about where her body was found, how it was positioned, what she was wearing. The kind of things that, in detective work, are called holdback evidence. Facts you keep secret specifically so you can identify the real perpetrator. After 15 hours of interrogation, Richard Buckland confesses. He admits to ending Dawn Ashworth's life. The police celebration is immediate. They caught him. After 3 years of nothing, they finally have their man. But there's a problem. Buckland absolutely, completely, and totally denies having anything to do with Linda Mann. He'll confess to Dawn all day long. But Linda? No. He had nothing to do with that. He doesn't know anything about it. And here's the thing. The evidence says both attacks were committed by the same person. Same blood type, same enzyme profile, same method, same victim type, same geographical area. There's no way these are two different attackers. But if Buckland did Dawn, he had to have done Linda too. The science says so. So why won't he confess to both? Detective Baker has a bad feeling about this. Something doesn't add up. False confessions happen more often than people think, especially when suspects are young, scared, and interrogated for hours on end. But Buckland knew those details. How do you explain that? They need more evidence, something definitive, something that can't be questioned or doubted. About 10 miles from Narborough, at the University of Leicester, a geneticist named Dr. Alec Jeffreys is working on something that has nothing to do with criminal investigations. He's studying genetic variation, trying to understand how DNA sequences differ between individuals. It's pure research, academic work, with no practical application in mind. Then one morning in September 1984, ironically, just months after Linda Mann's ending, Jeffreys develops an X-ray film from one of his experiments. What he sees stops him cold. The film shows a pattern, a unique pattern of genetic markers that looks almost like a barcode. Every person's pattern is different, as unique as a fingerprint, but far more distinctive. The implications hit him immediately. You could identify anyone from their DNA. Parents could be matched to children. Individuals could be distinguished from one another with absolute certainty. He calls it genetic fingerprinting. Now, Jeffreys isn't thinking about crime. He's thinking about paternity disputes, immigration cases, medical applications. But when news of his discovery starts spreading through the scientific community, someone else starts thinking about crime. Detective Baker hears about this new technique and has an idea. What if they could use genetic fingerprinting to prove Buckland attacked both girls? The evidence already suggests the same person did both attacks. If Buckland's DNA matches the evidence from both scenes, that would be irrefutable proof. Case closed. Baker contacts Dr. Jeffreys. Would he be willing to analyze the evidence from both attacks and compare it to Richard Buckland's DNA? Jeffreys has never done criminal forensic work before. This would be the first time genetic fingerprinting has ever been used in a criminal investigation. But he agrees. The process is meticulous. DNA is extracted from the evidence, cut into fragments using special enzymes, and then sorted by size through a process called electrophoresis. The fragments create a pattern, a unique genetic signature that appears as dark bands on an X-ray film. Jeffries processes the evidence from both girls first. The results come back clear as day. Both attacks were committed by the same person. Their DNA profiles match perfectly. No question. Now for Richard Buckland's DNA. The results come back, and they're not what anyone expected. Richard Buckland's genetic profile doesn't match, not even close. He didn't attack Linda Mann. And despite his detailed confession, he didn't attack Dawn Ashworth either. Think about what this means. A 17-year-old boy confessed to a crime he didn't commit. Under pressure, scared, confused, he admitted to ending someone's life. Without DNA evidence, Richard Buckland would have been convicted. He would have spent the rest of his life in prison for something he didn't do. On November 21, 1986, Richard Buckland becomes the first person in history to be exonerated by DNA evidence. He walks out of custody, a free man. But his freedom creates a terrifying problem. If Buckland didn't do it, then who did? The real attacker is still out there, still free, still dangerous. Detective Baker makes a decision that will change criminal justice forever. He's going to use this new DNA technology not just to exclude suspects, but to find the real perpetrator. He's going to conduct a DNA manhunt. The plan is audacious. Every male between the ages of 13 and 33 in Narborough, Enderby, and Littlethorpe will be asked to voluntarily provide blood and saliva samples for DNA testing. Over 5,000 men. The goal is to test everyone, eliminate the innocent, and flush out the guilty. Think about how unprecedented this is. This is 1987. DNA profiling is brand new. Most people have never heard of it. And police are asking thousands of men to voluntarily give samples that will reveal their genetic identity. There's no legal requirement, no warrant, just a letter asking for cooperation in catching a child attacker. And you know what? People do it. They line up. They roll up their sleeves. They open their mouths for swabs. Because 2 girls are gone, and everyone wants to help catch whoever did it. The testing begins. Sample after sample after sample. Weeks turn into months. And slowly, a picture emerges. None of the profiles match. Not a single one. The manhunt appears to have failed. Colin Pitchfork is 27 years old, married, father of 2 young children. He works at the local bakery, decorating cakes and making bread. He's got a history with police, indecent exposure convictions, but nothing violent. Nothing like this. When the letter arrives asking for a DNA sample, Pitchfork starts to sweat. See, he knows his DNA would be a problem because he attacked both girls. He ended both their lives. And now police have this new technology that can prove it. So he comes up with a plan. There's a co-worker at the bakery named Ian Kelly. Nice guy, a bit naive. Pitchfork approaches him with a story. He says a friend of his is in legal trouble, had already provided a DNA sample for that friend, and now the police are asking him to give another sample. Could Kelly help him avoid the bureaucratic hassle of redundant testing? Just go take the test using Pitchfork's ID so Pitchfork doesn't have to do it twice? It sounds ridiculous, right? Who would fall for that? But Kelly does. Maybe he trusts Pitchfork. Maybe he doesn't think it through. Maybe Pitchfork is more persuasive than the story sounds. They go to a photo booth together. Kelly's picture is taken. Then Pitchfork takes his own passport photo and performs surgery on it with a razor blade. Kelly's face goes in where Pitchfork's should be. The forgery is crude but effective enough. Ian Kelly walks into the testing center, presents Colin Pitchfork's ID, and gives a blood sample. The DNA is processed. It doesn't match the attacker's profile. Colin Pitchfork is eliminated from the suspect list. Of the 5,000 plus samples tested, none match. The investigation stalls. Months pass. The case grows cold again. Colin Pitchfork thinks he's gotten away with it. He's outsmarted the police, beaten the system, won. But he makes the fatal mistake that so many criminals make. He can't keep his mouth shut. August 1st, 1987. Ian Kelly is at the Clarendon pub with co-workers from the bakery. It's been nearly a year since he took that blood test for Pitchfork. The group is drinking, laughing, telling stories. The conversation turns to the investigation, the DNA testing, how crazy it all was. And Kelly, loosened up by alcohol and wanting to contribute something interesting to the conversation, tells them about it. About how he took the test for Colin Pitchfork, about the fake ID, about helping his friend avoid redundant testing. A young woman sitting nearby overhears. Her name has never been released publicly, but her actions saved lives. Because she immediately recognizes that something is very, very wrong with Kelly's story. Normal people don't volunteer to take someone else's blood test. Friends in legal trouble don't ask for help avoiding redundant testing. None of it makes sense. Unless Pitchfork was hiding something. Unless he was afraid of what his DNA would reveal. The woman makes a phone call that changes everything. Police locate Colin Pitchfork within hours. When they knock on his door, he doesn't even try to run. He knows it's over. By this point, he's read newspaper articles about DNA profiling. He understands that his genetic signature will be his conviction. There's no point in fighting it. He confesses immediately. To Linda Mann, to Dawn Ashworth, to everything. The details he provides match the evidence perfectly. The monster has been hiding in plain sight for 4 years, working at a bakery, going home to his wife and kids, living a normal suburban life while carrying the darkest of secrets. His wife is devastated. She had no idea. How could she? The man she loved, the father of her children, had done unspeakable things. January 22nd, 1988. Colin Pitchfork stands in court as the judge delivers the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing: life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years before parole eligibility. Colin Pitchfork becomes the first person in history convicted of ending a life through DNA evidence. The same technology that exonerated Richard Buckland now convicts the real attacker. The same science that freed an innocent teenager now imprisons a guilty predator. Ian Kelly receives an 18-month suspended sentence for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. The court shows mercy. He was naive and manipulated, not malicious. But his actions nearly let a double attacker go free. The impact of the case spreads like wildfire through law enforcement worldwide. Police departments in the US, Europe, Australia, Asia. Everyone wants to know about this new technology. How does it work? How reliable is it? Can we use it? Dr. Alec Jeffreys becomes an overnight celebrity in forensic circles. His accidental discovery, meant for pure research, has revolutionized criminal investigation. Within months, DNA profiling becomes standard practice in major crime investigations across the developed world. Here's what happens next, and it's almost as fascinating as the original case. Cold cases that have been sitting in filing cabinets for decades suddenly become active investigations again. That piece of evidence from 1975 that couldn't be tested with available technology? Now it can be. That unsolved attack from 1980? The perpetrator's DNA is sitting in evidence storage, waiting to tell its story. In the United States, the FBI establishes CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, a database that allows DNA profiles to be compared across different jurisdictions. An attack in California can now be connected to evidence from a crime in New York. Patterns emerge. Serial offenders who thought they'd gotten away with it suddenly find themselves facing charges from crimes committed years or even decades earlier. Innocent people start walking out of prison. Men who've spent 10, 20, 30 years behind bars for crimes they didn't commit are exonerated when DNA evidence proves they couldn't have been the perpetrator. The Innocence Project is founded specifically to use DNA evidence to overturn wrongful convictions. To date, over 375 people in the United States alone have been exonerated through DNA evidence. The technology evolves rapidly. Early DNA profiling required samples the size of a quarter. Now, analysts can get a profile from a microscopic speck of blood or a single hair root. The first tests took weeks. Now they take hours. The original technique could distinguish between maybe one in a few thousand people. Modern DNA profiling can distinguish between one in several quintillion. Forensic genealogy emerges as a new tool, using DNA databases to find criminals through their relatives. The Golden State Killer, who terrorized California for decades, is finally caught in 2018 using genetic genealogy techniques that trace back directly to the Pitchfork case. Colin Pitchfork's story doesn't end with his 1988 conviction. In fact, the aftermath has sparked nearly as much controversy as the original crimes. He spent 33 years in prison. His 30-year minimum term was reduced to 28 years for good behavior in 2009. In 2016, he was moved to an open prison. By all accounts, he was a model prisoner. No incidents, no disciplinary actions, completing education programs and therapy. In June 2021, the parole board made a decision that shocked the families of his victims and much of the British public. They ruled that Colin Pitchfork was suitable for release. On September 1, 2021, at age 61, he walked out of prison a free man, subject to strict license conditions. Barbara Ashworth, Dawn's mother, told reporters, "The law is the law, and what they say goes." But it shouldn't have come about. He should have been locked away for life without parole as far as I'm concerned. She described her life as an existence, it's not a life. Pitchfork's freedom lasted exactly 2 months. In November 2021, he was recalled to prison for breaching his license conditions. The specific violation? He approached young women while out on walks from his bail hostel. No crimes were committed. No offenses were reported. But approaching young women was explicitly prohibited in his release conditions, and he did it anyway. Think about that. After 33 years in prison, knowing he's under the most intense scrutiny imaginable, within weeks of being released, Colin Pitchfork starts approaching young women. The very behavior that got him caught in the first place. The parole controversy continued. In June 2023, the parole board again recommended his release, arguing that his detention was no longer necessary for public safety. Justice Secretary Alex Chalk immediately challenged the decision, and it was blocked. Pitchfork remained in prison. In December 2023, another parole board hearing denied his release, determining he was still too much of a risk. But Pitchfork challenged that decision on procedural grounds. In February 2024, the board agreed to schedule yet another hearing before a different panel. Then in 2024, new allegations emerged. Pitchfork was accused of grooming and sexual touching of another prisoner while in custody. Police investigated but declined to pursue charges because the alleged victim didn't support the prosecution. Still, it's another pattern of concerning behavior. As of October 2025, Colin Pitchfork is 65 years old and remains in prison, Parole hearings scheduled for 2024 and 2025 have been repeatedly postponed due to his legal challenges and the need for more time to hear all evidence. The case continues to dominate headlines in the UK. Detective David Baker, now retired, has publicly stated that he believes Pitchfork is a psychopath who will never be safe to release. He could deceive the parole board, Baker has warned. It will never be safe to let him out. The families of Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth continue to fight against his release, appearing at every hearing, making their voices heard. They argue that under current sentencing guidelines, Pitchfork's crimes would result in a whole life order, meaning he'd never be eligible for parole. But he was sentenced under older, more lenient laws, and those are the laws that govern his case. The Narborough murders case changed the world in ways that are difficult to fully comprehend. Before Colin Pitchfork, DNA evidence didn't exist in criminal investigations. After Colin Pitchfork, it became the gold standard. Two teenage girls, Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth, lost their lives in the most horrific way imaginable. Their families have lived with that loss every single day for over 40 years. But their deaths also created a tool that has solved millions of crimes, freed hundreds of innocent prisoners, and brought justice to countless victims who might otherwise have been forgotten. Dr. Alec Jeffreys never intended to revolutionize criminal justice. He was just trying to understand genetic variation. But his discovery, applied to the Narborough case, opened a door that can never be closed. DNA profiling is now so fundamental to forensic science that it's hard to imagine criminal investigations without it. The case also revealed uncomfortable truths about false confessions. Richard Buckland confessed to a crime he didn't commit. Under interrogation, scared and confused, he admitted to ending someone's life. Without DNA evidence, he would have been convicted. How many other innocent people have confessed to crimes they didn't commit? How many are sitting in prison right now, before DNA evidence became standard, convicted on false confessions alone? The mass DNA screening that caught Pitchfork has been replicated hundreds of times since, though it remains controversial. Is it ethical to ask entire communities to provide DNA samples? What about privacy concerns? What about those who refuse? These questions are still being debated today. Colin Pitchfork's attempt to evade the DNA dragnet by having someone else take the test for him shows criminal innovation adapting to new technology. But it also shows the weakness of that adaptation. Criminals talk. They boast. They can't help themselves. Ian Kelly's pub conversation is a perfect example of how ego and alcohol can unravel even the most carefully planned deception. The ongoing parole controversy raises profound questions about justice, punishment, and public safety. Can someone who committed such horrific crimes ever be truly rehabilitated? Should good behavior in prison be enough to warrant release? How do we balance an offender's rights against victims' families, suffering, and public safety concerns? In Narborough's quiet churchyard, Linda Mann's grave is marked with flowers that are refreshed regularly. Dawn Ashworth is buried in a cemetery in Enderby. Most visitors don't know the history these graves represent. They don't realize these two teenage girls became part of forensic science history. The Black Pad footpath still exists. Now just another village walkway where people walk their dogs and children ride bikes. 10-Pound Lane still cuts through the brush, no longer a place of terror, but just a shortcut home. Time has moved on, as it always does. But in forensic laboratories worldwide, the legacy of those two girls lives on. Every DNA sample processed, every profile analyzed, every criminal caught through genetic evidence, every innocent person freed. Each one is a thread connecting back to Narborough, 1983 and 1986, when two horrific crimes inadvertently created the most powerful tool in modern criminal justice. Dr. Jeffrey's accidental discovery, applied to Detective Baker's persistence, examined through the lens of two tragic deaths, changed everything. Before the Narborough murders, DNA profiling was theoretical. After the Narborough murders, it was essential. The case reminds us that evil does leave traces, no matter how careful the perpetrator believes they're being. That science can speak for the silenced. That truth has a way of emerging, even when it seems buried forever. Colin Pitchfork thought he was clever. He thought having Ian Kelly take the test would save him. And it almost did. But criminals have a fatal flaw. They can't resist telling someone about how clever they are. That boast in the pub, fueled by alcohol and ego, ended his freedom forever. In the end, two girls lost their lives, but their deaths helped save countless others. An innocent teenager nearly lost his life to a false conviction, but was saved by science. A killer thought he'd escaped, but was caught by his own genetic signature. And the world of criminal justice divided into before and after, before DNA and after DNA. The red threads in Tampa, the genetic code in Narborough. Different cases, different countries, different decades. But the same truth. The smallest evidence speaks the loudest. Science gives voice to the voiceless. And justice, though sometimes delayed, has a way of finding its mark. The Narborough murders weren't just about catching one serial attacker. They were about opening a door to truth that can never be closed again. Every solved cold case, every exonerated prisoner, every caught criminal, each one traces back to those two girls, those two families, and that first DNA hunt. That's the legacy of Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth. Not just victims, but inadvertent architects of modern forensic science. Their deaths matter not just because of the tragedy they represent, but because of the justice they enabled for millions of others. And somewhere in a British prison, Colin Pitchfork sits in his cell, knowing that the very science he tried to outwit will keep him connected to his crimes forever. His genetic signature is locked in databases worldwide. His DNA profile is taught in forensics classes. His case is the foundation of modern criminal investigation. He thought he was clever enough to beat the system. Instead, he became the example of why no one can.